Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending today's City Council work session. We are going to hear from Ken Bowers, Planning Development, on the UDO work plan update.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm not Ken Bowers, Pat Young with the Planning and Development Department. I wanted to introduce this item briefly, and you will be hearing from Ken later. What's before you today is an update on Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO, text changes that you all have authorized to initiate or approved or that are under development by staff. And I want to recognize and appreciate you all as policy leaders and certainly our staff for the work. We've had over 24 of these UDO text amendments, which is why we wanted to come here and give you this update to make sure that you knew where all the ones you were interested in were in the process. And appreciate and thank you for the direction to update and improve the UDO. The UDO has been in place for over 7 years. We've learned a lot over those years about which provisions work, which provisions are obstructing housing production in needed areas, which provisions are difficult to apply, that are unclear, and these changes have improved the UDO in many ways. So you're going to hear from Mark Holland briefly with just a status report on those items, and then after Mark speaks, you'll hear from Ken Bowers on recommended changes that you all initiated in February that will address missing middle housing and help provide expanded and improved housing opportunities in the city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and we're available for any questions.
Good morning. Mark Holland with Planning and Development.
Good morning.
This is an update on the UDO status text changes that we currently have in process, as well as those that have been approved. First, we have the list of the text changes that have been adopted from beginning in January 1st of this year until this past City Council meeting on November the 4th, and so roughly over the past 11 months, we have 9 text changes that have been adopted, and these are some pretty significant ones as far as our department with the city. Particular of those is the site plan, plot plan, which was a lofty effort on our part and has a lot of moving pieces, and we were able to put those all together and put it into something that we think is going to streamline our process, make it a bit easier and less burdensome on applicants, as well as the accessory dwelling units. This is something that has been gone through several iterations with the city, and we think we have one that is a good working ordinance with that. Another is the design alternates and the second neighborhood meeting requirement. These were all probably the most significant of these within this group of text changes. Again, we had 9. And just to put this in some sort of measurement, these average out to be from the time of authorization to adoption about an average of 6.5 months between these. And I realize there's a couple of these that are sort of outliers, particularly site plan, plot plan, which took a significant amount of time, but then again, that was a heavy lift and had a lot of moving parts. So that was the sort of outlier of all of these. So the average time from authorization to adoption has been about 6.5 months. Next, we have text changes that are currently at the City Council level scheduled for public hearing. We have the infill setback and building height, which is scheduled for your December 1st public hearing, as well as the text change to modify the City Council authorization process for text changes and changes to zoning conditions. Both of those are on December the 1st. Text changes that are currently at the Planning Commission level are the text change for short-term rental and the text change for community gardens with on-site sales. Both of these are scheduled for this afternoon's text change committee. So we will be discussing both of those, and the hope is to have a recommendation from that committee, and it will move forward to the Planning Commission at their next scheduled meeting, as well as the district campus text changes. This is something that is scheduled for discussion on that November 24th Planning Commission agenda. At the Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community Committee meeting on the November 24th, we will be discussing the outdoor seating regulations within the NX. This is something that has been was discussed at the Planning Commission and authorized by council, and we'll be making a presentation with that. We were asked to conduct some additional research and provide those findings at that committee meeting, which we will be doing on November 24th. Text changes that have been drafted and are currently under staff review are the TC 1919, which is a considerable one. It's the administrative alternates. We should have something to the Planning Commission by the end of this year, early 2021. Also the manufactured housing access, hopefully by the end of this year in early 2021. And TC 5-20, which is the subject of a larger discussion today. We hope to have something before the Planning Commission and start that process with early 2021. Other text changes that are in the draft form and being reviewed are the stormwater regulations. This is being dealt with mainly by the City Attorney's Office and our stormwater management team, as well as TC 1720, which is to replace the Transit Overlay District with the Equitable Transit Overlay District. This has heavily influenced, developed by the Long Range Planning Department. And TC 18-20 is for the City Council quasi-judicial matters. Would move the approval authority for some quasi-judicial processes from the City Council to our Board of Adjustment. And these are text changes that are being developed by our city's attorney's office. These would include the plan development within the conditional use district, zoning permits, the rezoning process, development agreements, our sign ordinance, and our wayward sign ordinances. It is my understanding that these are all being drafted by the city's attorney's office due to legal consistency and requirements. And finally, we have text changes that are on hold, and this would be TC 5-19, which is home state violations. This is on hold because of the one that's currently working its way through the process, which is the short-term rental. Until that is adopted, this will be brought back before you at some point if we decide to move forward with it. With that, I will take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mark? Hey, Mark, I don't see any hands, so thank you.
Thank you.
I do see some thumbs up, though.
Good morning.
Morning, Ken.
Ken Bowers. Good morning. Ken Bowers of Planning and Development, and we're on to the next topic. I have a lot of slides, so I'm gonna dive right into it. We're here to talk about how to zone for the missing middle and to build on the council actions from February 4th. And I'm going to start with sort of a basic review of some concepts that I think are important to guide the discussion and everyone's thinking about the options we're going to present. Then we're going to do a brief recap of what we originally recommended to you on February 4th, what actions you took based on that recommendation, some unresolved issues that we've run to as we proceeded through drafting, and then I'm going to present 3 options and a recommendation at the end and get some feedback on that. So the 3 concepts that are, I think, fundamental to thinking about residential zoning and the yield that can be gotten out of land under our residential zoning is the concept of density. What is a lot and what is a site? And density is our common measure of units per acre. You have an acre of land and I can put 1 dwelling unit on it, that's 1 unit per acre. If I can put 10 dwelling units on it, that's 10 units per acre. And the UDO has 5 residential districts, and they are named after those unit per acre figures. The lowest density is R1, 1 unit per acre. Then we have R2, R4, R6, and our highest density is R10. If you want to do 10 units, above 10 units per acre, currently in the UDO, you need to be in a mixed-use zone such as RX, OX, or NX. And density can apply based on what is the thing under analysis. If I'm just building a building on a lot, then it applies to a lot. But if I'm developing a larger site or subdividing a large site into smaller parcels, then the density figure applies to that. So in an infill situation, we're mostly applying density to a lot. But when we're talking about greenfield development, where we have a larger tract and we're subdividing it for development, then we're looking at it at the realm of the site, and the implications are different in terms of how the UDO works. So my last point is that you can invert that ratio of units per acre and think of it as land area per unit. So if R10 allows me 10 units on 1 acre, and 1 acre is 4,560 square feet of land, you could also think of it as the fact that the density means that I have to have 4,356 square feet of land for every unit that I want to build in my development. Well, a lot is the smallest unit of fee simple land ownership. Lots are produced through the subdivision process, and the UDO sets minimum lot sizes for different building types. And they vary depending on what type of building type you want to build. One of the things is that when you look at the single or duplex unit, the lot size is always lower than what the density would permit. And the reason for that is that when you're subdividing a larger tract, you are going to have to set aside room for streets and stormwater devices and other common areas. So But if I put one unit on the minimum size lot, I'm actually exceeding the density of the district. And then a site is a thing that's defined in the UDO as any lot or group of contiguous lots functionally controlled by the same entity for purposes of development. And that's the fundamental unit of development plan review. Site is never a portion of a lot. If you have a very large lot and you're bringing even a small minor portion of it to be developed, your development plan is going to be reviewed as if it's the entire lot that's being developed. So a site is never a portion of a lot, but it can be multiple portions of a lot. And for the townhouse building type only, the UDO sets a minimum site area. We don't set a minimum site area. We set minimum lot areas for every other building type. But because townhouse lots are so small, because they're often just the land under the building, we set a minimum site area for those. And these are some representative standards governing development in the R10 district. So the minimum lot area for a detached house, single family, is 4,000 square feet. For a 2-unit is 6,000. For an apartment building, it's 15,000. There's no minimum lot area for a townhouse, but there is a minimum site area for a townhouse, and the UDO pegs it at 3,300 square feet. So is it legal for me to build a house on a 4,000 square foot lot? It is, because the way the UDO works is if you have a lot that exists, you can always put a house on. That's the minimum level of development that we allow. But can I put a duplex on a 6,000 square foot lot? I cannot, because that's nearly 15 units per acre. I would need 8,712 square feet to actually be allowed a duplex, even though the UDO would suggest that I could be able to do that, since that's the minimum lot size. Can I build townhouses on a site of 3,300 square feet? Can't do that either, because that would be over 26 units per the acre. And can I subdivide an 8,000 square foot lot into two 4,000 square foot lots? Can't do that, because unless there's some common area involved in that, I would actually need more land area that would again exceed the 10 unit per acre density in R10. So the point of all that is that when you think about zoning from a form-based perspective, it's really the lot dimensions that controls what can be built and whether you have sufficient area for the building and yard space and what the building envelope is. However, in an infill situation, what's really limiting development potential is that density, because the density is going to come into play for those smaller lots before you ever get the ability to utilize that smallest lot. The last thing I wanted to leave you with on just the review is that in our original recommendation, we didn't take into account that all the residential zones have 3 development options available. There's conventional, which is what most stuff falls under, but there's also these compact and conservation subdivision options that allow you to get smaller lot dimensions and in some cases additional density and building types if you set aside a portion of your site as open space. And while we haven't approved a huge number of these, it's enough of a fundamental part of the code that whatever changes we make to the conventional has ramifications for the compact and conservation options. And so we want to make sure that this all works together harmoniously. And right now, in terms of what kind of units or building types you can build, only the R10 allows townhouses and apartments, and then R6 allows duplexes, and the other districts don't allow anything other than single-family detached. And it's the same story in the compact development option, but in the conservation development option, which has a 40% open space set aside, you do get more unit types available in these lower density districts. Any questions about that before I move on to the recap of February 4th? I don't see any, so I'm going to keep moving. It's easier in the virtual setting, and we'll take questions at the end. So I can't advance my slide. Oh, there we go. So we were asked to come back in February with some low-hanging fruit, and we gave the council 5 recommendations. One was to allow the townhouse building type in R6. That would actually be a return to how the code used to work prior to the adoption of the UDO, and allow townhouses to be built at an extra 2 units per acre above the base density. So that's 8 dwelling units per acre in R6, 12 in R10. That is essentially about a 1/3 boost of density in R6 and a 20% boost in R10. And allow duplexes in R10 and R6 at the same dimensional standards as single family, so on that same minimum lot size with the same yard requirement. The other 2, normalized transition standards to be uniform across districts for apartment buildings, was dealing with a hiccup in the code that if I built the same apartment building in RX or OX, I would be held to different transition standards, even if the building was exactly the same. And then also eliminate the minimum lot size and some other barriers to the senior housing category. Council took all those recommendations and extended them, said also allow townhouses in R2 and R4, approved the density bonus, but wasn't specific as to whether that would also apply in R2 and R4, and then extended the duplex recommendation to R2 and R4, and then also accepted the other two. The other two are in green because they've actually already been adopted by text changes that Mark just reviewed. So the last two are done. The first three are what's under development as PC5 2020. So one question that staff grapple with is, if you're going to be developing townhouses in a district that's as low density in R2, you're by its very nature going to have substantial open space set aside. So what are the right standards for townhouse development at such low density? Is the density bonus intended to apply there? And how do we manage the open space part of it? How does it, again, if there is a lot of open space, relate to those conservation and compact development options? And then the other thing that we noticed was that by allowing duplexes on the smallest, on a single family lot, but only giving townhouses a modest boost, you have one type of attached dwelling, which is 2 units, a duplex on one lot, gets way, way more density than you could achieve if you were to subdivide the lots under those same units. And that didn't seem to make sense to us. So this is where we get to the options part of it. And the first option is to do what we originally presented to you, those 5 recommendations about adding townhouses into R6, allowing the modest bonus, and allowing duplexes in R6 and R10. Second option is to carry forward with our best interpretation of the February 4th council action, which would extend that 2 unit per acre bump for townhouses to the R2 and R4 district. Of course, in R2, that would mean that would be double density for townhouses based on what the R2 is. And then, again, allow duplexes on single-family lots in all of these districts. The third option we're going to present is based sort of on our new thinking of having really spent a lot of time on this text change and noodling around with it. And it has 5 major components, which I'll go through. The first is we've carved out so many exceptions for units per acre that why not abandon that and go to a more form-based approach like we've done in all the other districts in the UDO. And so we'll regulate land area and lot dimensions and setbacks, but not density. And we'll allow those land area and dimensional standards to control development yield as opposed to units per acre. And we'll also build on the minimum lot dimensions that are already in the UDO for these different building types. We'll normalize townhouses and duplexes so that they have the same achievable density or yield under these development options. We suggest that writing townhouses into the low-density districts using the conservation and compact options so that we're getting some significant open space protection as part of such developments. And then one thing that was neglected was, in our original recommendation, we would have left with the ironic fact that the apartment building type would have been held to a lower density standard than duplex or townhouse. We think that since apartments are by their very nature the most compact development option, they should have their standards aligned with the above change. So what we're saying here with regulate land area, not density, is that we're going to set a number of square feet at the lot or site per unit and allow that to control density. So instead of 6 units per acre, we're going to have 1/6 of an acre per unit for single family and lower figures than that for duplex and townhouse. We think that this will be clear and consistent. It'll be easy for the public to understand that here's the minimum lot size for a duplex. And yes, you can put a duplex on that minimum lot size because density is no longer a constraint on that. It makes it easy to adjust different standards. Density was a one-size-fits-all standard. It applied to every building type equally. This allows us to adjust the yield based on the specifics of the building type, so we can have a smaller land area per unit for the attached and the townhouse building types, and a yet smaller for the apartment building type. And it would eliminate the sort of internal conflict between lot dimension and density that's in the UDO. What we would like to do with townhouses and attached units or duplexes is basically have the same lot and site area minimums per unit so that the yields would be the same. And I'll get into those numbers a little bit later in my presentation to show how they work and how they compare with what we originally presented. But if I had a certain amount of land area in R6, I might be able to put 2 duplexes, or I could put 4 townhouses. So depending on what the market demanded, the yield would be the same. Building type would be somewhat different. The other nice thing about this is that it allows 2 side-by-side units on the individual lots is classified as a townhouse, not a duplex in the current code. It would allow that as an option for a lot of home builders who intend to sell their product to the final user and don't want to worry about having common areas. It may be a more attractive option for them. So here's some standards. Here's the current standards across the 4 zoning districts under consideration for duplexes. And we're proposing to maintain everything that's in orange is either new or changed. Maintain the same dimensional standards, add a site area per unit standard that's 1/2 of the minimum lot area, and then increase the minimum lot areas for accordingly for the R2 and R4 districts for duplexes. So existing duplex standards, I could not put a duplex on a 9,000 square foot lot. Under the new standards, I could do that in R6. Here's the existing townhouse standards, and not allowed in R6 at all, allowed in R10. We would tweak the minimum site area, call it a minimum site area per unit, get rid of the density, tweak the site width and other standards, but essentially carry forward a lot of the dimensional standards for townhouses since they've generally worked well. And again, if I have a 6,000 square foot lot, and or I had 12,000 square feet of lots in R6, I couldn't put 4 townhouses on it under current code. I could do that under this proposed change. And then for the apartment building type, this is all in one table. We're proposing to drop the minimum lot area to 10,000 square feet in R10, put a minimum lot area per unit that's a little smaller than duplex. So duplex is 3,000, for apartments would be 2,500. Get rid of the density. This would yield a effective maximum yield on a lot of around 17 units per acre. It would also mean that if you had a 10,000 square foot lot, you could put a quadruplex, because that would be 4 units, 4 times 2,500 is 10,000 square. With regards to the townhouses in R4 and R2, our new proposal is allow townhouses by right in a compact subdivision in R4 and in a conservation subdivision in R4 and R2. The dimensional standards would, again, be set not by density, but by site area, and they would allow a little boost in density to provide an incentive for the open space preservation. One question you might be asking is, how many lots, for example, would be able to accommodate a duplex under this zoning scheme? It would not be all of them, because some of them would be below those minimums, but it would be a lot of them. It would be, depending on the district, somewhere between over a third to over a half of all lots. So looking at this on maps, here's all the R10 zoning in the city's jurisdiction. 16% of lots could have a quadruplex or larger. 40% of lots in R10 could have duplex. In R6, which is a more expansive zoning district, a little over a third of lots are big enough to house a duplex. In R4, about 44%. R4 is the largest zoning district by land area in the city. And then we don't have a lot of R2. Most of it's out Leesville Road and around Hempstead Park and on Trailwood Drive. But over half of those lots would be big enough to accommodate a duplex. So the option 3, obviously we spent a lot of time talking about it. It's sort of a new staff recommendation. Utilizes existing standards that are in the UDO. So it's an evolutionary change, but it's also a very meaningful change in the sense that it will allow significant new opportunities for housing production in neighborhoods. It rationalizes our duplex and townhouse standards and makes fee simple duplex housing easier to build, puts it on the same yield basis as non-fee simple duplex development, which should improve the compact and conservation development options. Hopefully they'll be used more often, which will promote open space preservation, but it preserves the overall intent of where I think the council is going, which is to permit more housing types and more locations and really provide a significant opportunity for missing middle house. And then my last two slides are just to compare the options. So what is the maximum yield per acre of current code, option 1, option 2, and option 3? For detached, we're really talking about the ability to do small-scale subdivisions. Option 3 provides the higher yield. For attached, options 1 and 2 provide the higher yield because they were going to allow a duplex on a single-family lot. One of the issues that we have with this, looking at the dimensional standards, is that because of the requirement for 2 parking spaces per unit, it's difficult to fit a duplex and the attendant parking spaces on a 4,000 square foot lot in R10. Much more feasible to do it on a 6,000 square foot lot. But the yields are obviously a little lower. For townhouses, the yields we're proposing are higher in R6 and R10 and a little lower in R4 and R2 than option 2. And since no changes were made to the apartment building type in the prior recommendation, you would get a higher yield from this recommendation for someone wanting to build a multi-unit building. So that concludes my long-winded presentation, and I'd like to hear, staff would like at this point to hear some feedback. Which option do you like best? Is it one of them clearly, or would you like to mix and match some of the things that are in the option? So that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Ken. I didn't think it was long-winded at all. I thought it was really informative. Thank you for doing that. Do we have any comments from council or questions? Councilmember Cox?
Ken, could you go back to the slide that shows the map for R4?
Yes.
Can you identify, or would you be able to provide information about how many of those lots are in homeowners associations or subdivisions that have covenants that control what can be developed?
That would be a significant amount of research because we don't track covenants at the city, so we would have to look for. I think it could be done, but it would be a lot of work to do it. But your point, I think, is that in many cases, duplex construction in these neighborhoods may be prohibited by covenants, and that is almost certainly the case for many neighborhoods.
Okay, and what would you estimate to be the percentage?
I wouldn't want to put a number on it without doing more research, but I think, a proxy would be which neighborhoods were developed at a time when covenants became common. And they were pretty common in Raleigh since the 50s.
Okay. I would be interested in understanding that better because I guess the question would be in terms of equity. I mean, are we going to really impact the neighborhoods in Northwest Raleigh, or are we going to impact more neighborhoods in Southeast Raleigh? Depending on where the covenants are.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Melton?
Thank you. I disagree a little bit with Councilmember Cox. The comments are we're going to impact. I don't impact with what? More housing? I mean, I think that's what we need. My concern is I have a bit, sorry, there's going to be noise now. I have a bit of a concern about increasing the required lot size for a duplex. When you look at the R10 district, for example, which seems to comprise of most of our downtown core, this recommended change only allows the duplexes on 40% of that area. And so I'm wondering if there's a way we can get that number up while still trying to apply the approach that you've recommended.
Yes, all we have to do is adjust the lot dimensions. And one of the advantages of the approach, once you remove the units per acre from the residential districts, any change in the lot dimensions then becomes effective and available to any lot that meets that dimension. So if we decide that maybe we think 6,000 is too large, but and 4,000 is too small, but we're comfortable with 5. We could choose that, and I think adjust the numbers across the different building types accordingly.
Councilmember Cox.
Well, I have to disagree with Councilmember Melton. If we go to smaller lot sizes and we reduce the amount of area that we have available for off-street parking, and I know in District B we have neighborhoods where I regularly receive complaints because of so many cars parked on the streets, too close to people's driveways, and creating other kinds of problems such as that. Not everybody lives in a transit-oriented area, and people do depend on their automobiles. So if we develop a standard that's applied, particularly in suburban areas, where we reduce the lot sizes and increase the density, what we end up with is more congestion of automobiles parked on the streets and causing problems. So we do need the larger lot sizes, in my opinion, in order to accommodate the parking that, frankly, is not going to go away.
If I could,
Councilmember Stewart and then Councilmember Branch, but let's go with Mr. Bowers. He has a response.
yeah, I mean, I just wanted to quickly elaborate, since Councilmember Cox brought up the issue of transit, is that obviously another thing that's in the works is the drafting of the TODR overlay, which would go over residential areas. And so staff has been looking at this proposal in terms of how it would be adapted for the TODR overlay. One of the things the TODR overlay will do is either reduce or eliminate off-street parking, which then allows the lower lot size. And so our current thinking is that we would drop the lot size for attached and dimensional standards for townhouse in the overlay district, which of course would be mapped in places where there was significant transit availability. So again, this framework, we're thinking ahead about how this framework would work and how it would relate to the transit overlay. So that was just a remark I wanted to put in there. It seemed relevant to the discussion.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart, then Councilmember Branch.
Yeah, thank you. And I find this topic quite heady, but I really like where staff landed on option 3. I think it really gets to kind of the conversation we've been hearing thus far from council members Cox and Melton of option 3 is really this, like, let's weave through the middle of this and really come out with a good compromise and a very thoughtful compromise. And so I am quite in favor of that option, and just wanted to make that known for whenever we're ready to kind of continue the conversation. I do also want to signal some support for continuing to look for additional ways to expand our housing choices. This parking minimums things is interesting to me. It sounds like we need some more work and research on it. And yeah, I'll pause there, but thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Branch.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ken and staff for the information. I've went and I've looked at the information, and I kind of agree with Councilwoman Stewart as far as option 3 is kind of the middle of the two options that I kind of see as far as working. I like it from the standpoint of allowing the duplexes. The beauty behind my district is, I think if we did a count of number of duplexes, I probably have more duplexes than any other district in the city right now. So what we're really doing is, one of the problems I see is that as some of these duplexes have been torn down, our current policy does not allow them to be rebuilt. So this I see as a way to help some of that, to find a balance. You know, we often hear character of community and things of that nature. This allows us to try to keep true to some of the character while helping increase density, you know, at the same time. So I definitely like option 3. I support option 3 because what we have right now is not working, and finding that balance between the missing middle around our infills and new development. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Councilmember Melton.
Yeah, thanks for raising the TOD issue, because I hadn't really thought of that. And I think that probably sufficiently addresses my concerns about the lot sizes for now, because I think that the downtown core and along our transit corridors will probably fall in a lot of those TOD zonings. And then this issue with lot size restricting some duplexes will probably go away. I also think it's probably a good compromise to some of the concerns that Councilmember Cox raised about making sure that the density is in the appropriate places. And so I can support this this third option. I think we still have more work to do, but it sounds like it's a good addressing some of our immediate issues, finding a good compromise, and then seeing additional ways maybe we can move forward with some more public engagement.
Any other comments, Councilor Buffkin, Knight, or Fort? We are trying to provide some direction to the Planning Commission on how we move forward. Councilmember Buffkin and then Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mr. Bowers, thank you for your presentation. Just wanted to offer a couple reactions and see what you had to say about that. So one thing that strikes me is that I think this effort and some of the work we heard about earlier can really help smaller local developers, maybe folks that are developing a lot for the first time. Maybe they only have 1 or 3 lots under development. I think all this streamlining and simplification and flexibility really opens up some options from what I've seen of builders doing creative things, like putting a duplex in an area and the building itself looks exactly like the single family homes next to it. For example, the entranceways are either centered in the building or they're around the side of the building, but the front looks a lot like the rest of the neighborhood. So that's one thing I'd like to get your reaction to. One specific question, of course, you all know a portion of my district is in the Falls watershed. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit, Ken, to how this relates to overlay districts like our watershed protections. And then lastly, I was struck, and I thought it was very helpful to have the map of the areas of the city that were going to be impacted by this change or potentially impacted. And when I saw that picture, I was struck by how little is going to change, which I think is a measure of good government. We're evolving our regulations, giving the market time to react, giving our community members a time to react, and this will evolve slowly. And my belief is, and I have some data to back this up, that most of North Raleigh neighborhoods have those restrictive covenants that Mr. Cox was speaking to. So I don't think this is a radical change, but I do think it's a needed change, and I could get comfortable with option 3 and some more discussion and information as the process goes ahead. But if you have any reactions now to any of that, Mr. Bowers, I'd love to hear it.
So on the first issue, we are, in terms of regulating the design, layout, location of doors, or other facade elements for a 1-2 family house or a duplex, we are constrained by state law. The zoning enabling statute was amended a few years ago to essentially prohibit any sort of design-based regulation for structures that are constructed pursuant to the 1 and 2 family building code, which is inclusive of townhouses. So that type of regulation is not available until you get to a 3-unit building, because when you're in a 3-unit building, you're now in a different building code, and that statute does not apply. So I will observe that. I also take as compliments this was designed to be a evolution of standards that were in the code that would have a meaningful impact on the ability to do small-scale infill development. So I'm glad that you're taking it as that way, because that was absolutely the intent. I'm trying to think of, is there another comment I needed to react to? Oh, the Falls Lake watershed. Yes, sorry. So our approach to watersheds is 2 things. One is use control, which is mostly R1 zoning. So a lot of the watershed is zoned R1, and of course R1 is not being changed at all in this proposed amendment. So that's unchanged. The other thing is the overlay zoning, which deals with issues like forestation and the percentage of impervious cover, and all that would stay intact as well. So the function of the watershed overlays would not change. So I think for the most part, this is going to have little to no impact on development within the watersheds.
Okay, thank you. Next, we had Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This really goes to both presentations and really more to Pat, but I was struck by how many, in the first presentation, how many UDO changes that we have had between January 1 and November 4th. And as everyone knows, most, if not all, the council campaigned and ran on more housing options, and especially more affordable housing options. So I am glad and I appreciate the staff's work on making sure these text changes have moved forward and moved through, and I appreciate the rest of the council's work to make sure this happened, and also with the ones that will be coming before us and the potential ones. So I'm excited about that, and I appreciate the work that's been done on it. I think these are going to make big differences in housing options and affordable housing options in our city. So I'm excited about that. And as to the last presentation, Ken, that you did, the missing middle, certainly with R4 and R2, especially a big impact on District E. And so I want to make sure we get this right. So as I think as most of the other councilors like what option 3 gives us, and I hope we continue to move down the road in that direction for this set of circumstances. So thanks again for all y'all's work. And Pat, I wish I could give you more credit for it, but I know since you're new, all this we got a lot ahead of us, and look forward to work with you on continuing with the help of the affordable housing bond to move forward with more housing options and affordable housing options. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat's available to come back to the podium for a concluding remark. I see there's more remarks. I just wanted to emphasize this is very helpful feedback, and of course, this is just informing our drafting. When this comes back to you as an ordinance, there'll be also additional opportunities for council to weigh in on the specific standards.
Councilmember Fort.
First, I take exception with Mayor Pro Tem Branch's assessment that he has the most duplexes in the city of Raleigh, because I would beg to differ that there's probably competition between District C and District D on that particular issue. So
No problem.
Maybe we'll have staff do a running tally and see who has the most. What I would say is, as a number of the proposed rezoning cases have come before the council and the ones that I've had conversations with folks in the community, I know that a lot of folks in District D would support definitely having the ability to have more townhouses under R6. Certainly as option 1 is presented. I would have to have, some additional conversations with some of my folks as relates to option 3, but certainly look forward to seeing what some of the discussion is before the Planning Commission on that issue.
And Ken, I would weigh into that option 3. I think is very thoughtful. When we created the UDO, we really were focused on form-based regulations, and this gets us back to where that original discussion occurred. So, I think that with some of the things that we're doing, I think we need to be very aggressive around TOD and ensuring that our city grows the way we want it to. Those are the appropriate places for density. So ensuring that occurs and we are looking in that way, I think will be very helpful. So talking about the TOD districts help get me there as well. So if anybody has any other questions, okay, Councilmember Stewart.
Apologies. I did have one question. A couple of us had talked offline about in this presentation, it looks like there's a huge focus on duplexes, and I wondered where we were at with the triplexes and quadplex piece of this, and if staff could just speak to that.
So right now, right now, 3 units in a building is considered an apartment building type, and it's only allowed in R10. This does open the door for triplexes and quadruplexes, but you have to have 10,000 square feet of land area. So, and we've pegged the land area per unit at 2,500. So one thing that could be done is you could drop that minimum lot area to 7,500 square feet. That would allow a triplex on a lot of that size, and then you would need 10,000 square feet for a quadruplex. Again, taking a more incrementalist approach, we left the somewhat larger lot size in there, thinking that an apartment building is enough of a change in building type that a larger lot was appropriate. You could certainly put a triplex on a 10,000 square foot lot under this proposal, but you could also put a quadruplex on the same lot.
When you bring this back to us, Ken, could you give us options on that? And maybe some
we could.
Options?
We could, and one thing we could do is we could redefine attached as a building of 2 to 4 units, for example, as opposed to a building of 2 units. One of the advantages of our current building types is that though it does mirror those breaks in the building code, where you've got 3 building types that are in the 1 and 2 family code and a 4th building type that's in the commercial code.
Councilor Stewart?
I'm wondering if, since we don't have triplexes and quads in the code right now, if this isn't a longer conversation. And so I want to make sure that this piece of what we're looking at today moves forward on a quicker timeline, and don't want it to get bogged down with something that would require a really heavy lift. So just want to maybe note that there should be a differentiation there.
I think that's fine. And one advantage of the approach that we've put here is that if we ever want to make an amendment, it's just adding another column in a table or adding another table in the UDO. From a drafting perspective, it becomes fairly easy.
Is that something, Ken, that can be done now, or is it something, is that a heavy lift? And will this?
We would need a little bit more direction, but we could bring forth an option maybe for discussion once we have a draft of the ordinance and see where that goes. And I guess the question is that something you'd like us to take directly to Planning Commission as part of this text change, or is it something that you would like us to come back to you with before it ends up going to Planning Commission? What I'm hearing is, one way or another, making a special allowance for the 3 to 4 unit building and treating that separately from generic apartments. I believe that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, I believe that's what you're hearing, Ken. And also, let me ask, how long do you think it's going to take you to turn this around?
Well, we were hoping to get it in front of the Planning Commission in early 2021. In order to make sure this proposal worked, we have created dimensional tables for all these different unit types across all the development options, and it looks good. So that's the big part of the ordinance drafting. And so now that step has been done, I think we could probably get an ordinance drafted in 4 weeks and be ready to take it to Planning Commission in January or February.
Okay.
Depending on their schedule.
Is there some consensus among the council that this goes to the Planning Commission with 3 and 4 units in it?
I'm a little hesitant on 3 and 4, but I think having the information is good, and we could pull if needed.
Yep. Well, and I always say a McMansion is probably no different than a 4-unit apartment, if you would call it that. There's a few examples. So and one thing I think that is very helpful, Ken, is photography. So the show me, don't tell me rule. So I think that's important to do that when it goes to Planning Commission, when it goes back to us, so you can actually visualize with pictures what some of these might look like.
Right. We actually had a number of pictures in this presentation, but given the alarming number of slides that were already in there, we decided, since we were not selling you on the idea, we were just talking about the technical details, but we have a good photo library of examples.
Okay. Yeah, oftentimes when I've shown people pictures of a quad, they're like, really? So I think being able to see that will be helpful. Okay, so there's consensus to move this forward to the Planning Commission with representing 3 and 4 in there. Ken, I have 2 questions that are kind of related. They're related to housing, but not related to this presentation. One is, what is the status of tiny homes? And the second is, have we done any look at flag lots?
So we're doing some more research on tiny homes because that was part of the presentation we did on programs for ADU construction. So that's something that's currently under research. Flag lots are a thing that there's been some discussion. As you know, Ms. Pat Young did some flag lot reforms in Durham, and the city certainly has some deep lots where they will allow subdivision. So it's a thing that we've talked about, but we haven't brought forth a proposal yet. There's just been some internal discussions. If that's a thing that you would like us to report back on, we can do that. Yeah,
when my daughter's neighborhood in Atlanta, they have made very good use of flag lots and very creative, and they look great. So I think it's something we should look at.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, any additional comments or questions before we break? Okay, Ken, Pat, Mark, thank you all for great presentation, and thank you for your hard work. It's deeply appreciated. And
thank
well
you very
done.
much.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to break, and please be back here for the start of our 1 o'clock meeting. Thank you.